Hey everyone, welcome back. So today I'm going to discuss about a popular Spring Boot interview questions on day-to-day basis. When you are attending an interview, you will see different kind of interview questions, right? So all types of interview questions we are going to discuss now. Now the first part called Spring Boot interview questions. In this way we have Spring Security, Microservices, Kubernetes, Docker. Later on time we have a micro design pattern interview questions, project based scenario based interview questions. We have a n number of types we have, guys, when you are attending an interview. First we'll start from the basic. First have a look here. Normally when you are attending an interview for the Spring Boot and REST API, I mean to say completely a Java backend developer, first one part a core Java. Once you are comfortable with core Java, and then people will jump directly into Spring Boot and microservices here. Okay, the first question called IOC container here. Okay, even guys, just reading the theory points, you may remember now, but later on time you will not remember. So you should be implement also these concepts in the practical way also here. Okay, we'll jump into what is IOC container here. Means IOC stands for inversion of control, which means control of creating and injecting dependencies from application to Spring container. Means inversion of control is responsible to create the objects for your. Usually in core Java you are creating the objects, right? But in Spring ecosystem, container will create the object. If you have any dependencies, it will taken care automatically for you. Through how it will taken care dependency means by using concept called dependency injection. We have using this concept, so we can wire the objects together. It will be more modular, testable and maintainable here. So this IOC container, we have a two types of IOC containers. One for the a bean factory, another for the application context. Bean factory is very lightweight. Now in the latest version, it is deprecated completely. And application context. On top of that, we have other containers also. The base foundation of IOC container has these two types we have. It is kind of a advanced container when you are developing REST API development. Apart from standalone applications, this IOC container is sufficient. But when you are developing any web application or distributed application, application context IOC container is required here. That is about what is IOC container here. That is the first part. Second, difference between the constructor injection and setter injection. Okay, it's a spelling mistake, guys. That's okay. Usually if you want to inject the dependencies in your project, okay, so one interface we have a multiple implementation classes we have, right? So if you want to inject, we have a two types of dependency injections we have. One for the constructor injection, another for the setter injection we have. Dependency injection is a design pattern where usually object dependencies are provided externally rather than creating. There is no manual step at all. So if you want to achieve at the time of class loading, you need dependency class, then we can go for constructor injection. See, constructor injection inject the dependencies through the constructor, and it is best for mandatory dependencies. Setter methods, when you have a setter method at the time of object creation, dependency class is not required. It is completely optional. If you feel, then you can go for the setter injection here. Usually you will see in interview room which is the best, setter injection versus constructor injection. I feel recommend setter injection is the best option. Then in interview room a follow-up question will happen. Why? Means if I use constructor injection, there is a circular dependency problem we will get. Means A is calling B class, B is calling the A class. then this constructor injection, it will create a problem, it will stop, it will terminate your program immediately here. So that's why setter injection is the best option here. Even apart from setter and constructor, we have a field injection by using an annotation at the rate Autowired. That's it. That is sufficient here. That is about difference between the constructor injection and setter injection here. Okay. Now next point, what is Spring Boot here? As part of Spring framework, I feel these two are important questions. You should understand what is IOC container, difference between setter injection versus constructor injection as well. Next, what is Spring Boot? Now it is a framework. On top of Spring framework, a Spring Boot is introduced. The main context for Spring Boot is, okay, it simplifies application development by providing auto configuration, okay, embedded servers, production ready features, and no XML configuration. When you are reading an interview, it is a single line, but when you start implementation, each topic has 1 hour of session, guys. So always, even if you are a first time, if you're watching for the first time this video, please make sure complete our, we have a pre-recorded sessions also, we have with complete full stack videos. If you watch those videos, easily you can understand about these points as well. Okay, that is about a Spring Boot. Now how it is different from Spring versus Spring Boot here, means the first step called configuration. So if you are using Spring framework, it is completely XML based approach and it is a manual. But in Spring Boot, auto configuration feature we have. Server setup, we need a external Tomcat is required. But here embedded server we have, means embedded Tomcat. And here outcome, if you want to deploy your Spring application in the real time, we need a war file, and we need in external server, we need to deploy the war file. But in Spring Boot, we need a jar file is sufficient. Inside a jar, we have our embedded server. Okay, and the setup time, it will take lot of time for infrastructure setup and project setup, configuration, everything. But it is very less fraction of seconds, we can create our application about Spring Boot here. Okay, that is a very very important point about difference between Spring versus Spring Boot. When you are attending an interviews, definitely you should go for all these documents, so that you will get a clear picture as well. Okay, now if you want, okay, we have our full stack recorded sessions as well, recently completed the batch 40, where all these videos are available. If you see here, you can see course introduction session, Spring Boot introduction, Spring Boot features. Day 3 and day 4 completely you will understand about Spring Boot, all the concepts as well. From here, database development will start. Okay. Now, even when you are preparing this interview, please make sure complete these videos as a first step. So once you done implementation, when you are reading these points is easy for you. So that's why. Okay. Next, what is auto configuration here? Whenever you run your Spring Boot application, it will configure everything for you. Means if you add a Tomcat dependency, what will happen? You can run your application in a web application, distributed application. Application will be deployed into a Tomcat. Simple. Now, if you add as a data JPA, what will happen? Database configuration will be done. Just you need to add URL, username, and password. That is the best example. So, automatically configure your application based on libraries. For example, if you add web dependency, it automatically set up a Tomcat, Spring MVC, and JSON support. If you add a JPA, data source, Hibernate, repositories, everything will be automated. You no need to configure manually here. That is the meaning of auto configuration here. Okay. Next, if there is few cases, when you load, if you run your Spring Boot application, all the features will be enabled by default here. But if you want to disable, you can specific auto configuration. Suppose when you are running an application, I want to exclude data source information. By using this annotation, you need to specify exclude tag. So here database configuration will be, what will happen, it will be excluded from your configurations as well. This is some kind of a tricky interview questions. How do you disable specific auto configuration here? Okay, remember this point. Next, what is Spring Boot Actuator? Okay, this is also another important. If you are running your application in the production, now I want to know status. I want to know health of the application, whether the application is running or not. How you can monitor your Spring Boot application means Spring Boot is given one of the feature called Spring Boot Actuator. It is a tool, it is a built-in endpoints to monitor and manage your Spring Boot application in the real time. Once you add as a Spring Boot Actuator in your application, it will expose, okay, it will expose slash health endpoint. Using this endpoint, you can monitor your application is running or not. Using the metrics, yes, you can able to know how many threads are created, how many requests you made, complete information, all the metrics you will get using this actuator here. That is about what is Spring Boot Actuator here. Basically, implementation of Spring Boot Actuator we done as part of our Kubernetes development. Lot of people not aware, right? Somewhere a monitoring we will do. There is one as part of Kubernetes here only, guys. As part of here, that monitoring setup we done Prometheus and Grafana. Using here, we can able to do this actuator is the real use case here. Okay. Next, what are starter dependencies in Spring Boot? Means, let me open start.spring.io. Here, see, there are dependencies. Now, you want to add as a, I want to run your application on a web application. You need to add as a Spring Boot starter. You need a database communication. Now you can add as a data JPA. Now you need a security. You need as a Spring security dependency. So this, if you click on the explore, you can able to see starters are available. See Spring Boot starters, data JPA, security, web dependency. These are all dependencies are available here. This is nothing but your starter dependencies here. See, in Spring Boot, starter dependencies are ready-made packages. It include all common libraries needed for a specific task. Like if you want to build a REST API, you need to add this dependency. If you need a JPA dependency. You need a security dependency. So basically it will saves lot of time and it will avoid version issues. Compatibility issues also you can avoid it as well. So Spring Boot is giving those many number of starters for us. So like you want to perform a validation. See here, just you can add as a validation starter. Now you want to add as a Lombok integrated. Lombok, okay, this is not part of Spring Boot, is external library. And in this way, see, Spring Web, you want to develop reactive based applications. See, Spring Reactive Web, you want to develop GraphQL based applications, GraphQL, and Spring Web Services. Lot of things are there as security, OAuth to client, authorization server, resource server, okay, JDBC API, data JPI. These are all kind of a different kind of starters given by your Spring Boot here. That is the benefit of using your Spring Boot starters here. Okay. Next. Now, another, whenever you are running a application, Spring Boot application, by default, it will run on a Tomcat. Now, in interview room, they will ask you, I want to run my application in a another embedded server, Jetty or under Tau. How you can achieve? Simply, you can say from web starter, you need to exclude. your Tomcat, and you need to add as a external dependency here. Means adding Jetty and embedded server as a dependency here. So this configuration will work. Your application will run on a Jetty server. It's a very, very important question in interview room. How do you use Jetty or Undertow or any web server instead of Tomcat? So you should say simple answer. I want to, we need to exclude Tomcat in WebStarter, and we need to add external dependency in our pom.xml file. That is your straightforward answer here, guys. Okay, this is about the, this is the point here. Next. Next, what is difference between the Spring Boot application and enable auto configuration here? So this enable auto configuration means it will load all the configuration classes based on your class path here. This is nothing but auto configuration feature. Now, this annotation is the combination of three annotations here. One for at the rate configuration, at the rate enable auto configuration, and a component scanning here. These three annotations is the combination. Configuration means you can make our class as a configuration class. Enable means it will enable auto configuration. Component scanning means it will scan our current package and sub package. If you want to load all the IOC container is responsible to scan all your classes about your Spring Bean classes here. So if we are using this annotation, we don't need to write all above three annotations are optional annotations here. You no need to write explicitly here. That is the difference between Spring Boot application and enable auto configuration here. So till now, whatever we discuss, the everything, if you watch these three sessions, and a Spring Boot introduction, and a Spring Boot features, and Spring Boot features underscore JP. These three videos are 3 hours of session. We discussed detailed information about what is Spring Boot, how it is working, Spring Boot features and everything here. Till here, the main popular, commonly generic interview questions we covered here. That is the first part. Now, second, here, difference between at the rate configuration versus at the rate bin means in the interview room, this is a common question like at the rate configuration is a class level annotation here. Okay, another one, bin is a method level annotation. This is the first difference. So if you want to load any security configurations, any Spring Boot specific configurations means we can use this annotation. Bean, if you have custom class you want to create, if you want to provide instructions to IOC container, then you can use at the rate bean annotation we should use here. So by default, it will create as a singleton object here. This is to load our configuration classes in our application we are using. Best example, security configuration classes. This is the best example, REST template. REST template, we can define your own class and we need to define. So if you go for XML based approach, we need to use at the rate beans tag here, at the rate bean tag here. In one configuration class, you can create more number of bean objects here. That is the difference here. The implementation about this concept you can understand about REST API consumer develop. This is the real use case implementation here. REST template, how to define a bean, how to define a configuration, that we explain here. That is about the 11th part here, guys. Okay, hope you guys are clear till about configuration versus bean. So if you want to take this part. As of now, no live sessions. So recordings we have. This is completely Spring Boot and REST API development. And if you need a e-commerce application development as a real-time approach, this is the sessions are available here. Here, if you see completely e-commerce based development, how all the microservice development, gateway, circuit breaker, tracing, Docker, Kubernetes, cloud knowledge, DevOps tools, Kafka system, JWTs, everything we covered in this course here. Alternatively, design patterns, especially for interview, it's very important. Through implementation, how to perform also we done here. And reactive programming, if you are completely new for reactive, the development of your application is very different in reactive programming style as well. The complete interview guide is available here only. You can download once you are enrolled here, guys. Okay, this is about the part 1 session. Till 11 questions we done, and we'll go for the next session for the next couple of questions as well. Almost we have 100 plus interview questions are available if we combine and everything, but it is keep on adding new questions as well every time here. Okay, so that's all for today's session. Thank you.